Today on Under the Big Tree, talking with the inventors of Keema. So we are here with Kurt Hebel and Carla Scaletti, the founders of Symbolic Systems and the inventors of the Kyma sound design language, as well as all of the additional hardware, the Paca, the Pacarana, the Capybara, and the other pieces that go along with it to be able to make an integrated sound design system, the power of which is something I have not seen anywhere else. So thank you guys for taking the time to be able to talk to me and to tell our folks about what Keema is all about.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know anything about it, can you sort of tell us what is Keema? What's it about?
Okay. So I think of Keema as a language for creating and modifying and combining and interacting with sound. So the way it works is that on your computer screen, on your laptop screen, you design signal flow graphs, and then you play them. And if you put in, each module has parameters, and you can make those parameters into faders on a virtual control surface. So when you play the sound, you automatically have a control surface on the screen, which, by the way, can also show up on an iPad, so that you can have a multi-touch screen as well.
Do you need any hardware with Keema, or is it just a piece of software that runs on a computer?
It's software that runs on two computers, so it's like a distributed system. The second computer was designed by Kurt Hebel, and he designed this computer specifically for calculating sound. So the architecture of it is set up specifically for Keema, so it's optimized to run Keema, and also we can dedicate all the cycles to doing sound. You don't have like this big heavy operating system. It's not checking the internet. It's not putting up graphics. It's just doing sound. So we don't have to cut any corners on our algorithms. We can do the very best sound quality possible because we've got this dedicated computer that's doing only sound.
Well, I can certainly tell you from my own experience that I have never heard pitch shifting with the quality and the fluidity that I've heard on a Keema system in terms of moving samples around. You can absolutely hear the quality. Okay, so basically the way that the system works, if somebody wants to get a Keema system, they purchase the computer, they purchase the Paca or the Pacarana, yes, right? And then the software comes along with it, and it's an integrated system. And it works on both Mac and PC?
Yes.
Carla, you and I have known each other, I was just trying to calculate it, for something like 30 years. And the reason we met was because you guys were showing Keema 30 years ago. I can't think of any other piece of digital audio technology that is still not only in existence, but still continuing to be developed 30 years later. That's amazing. So can you tell us the story of how Keema started and how this whole amazing journey began?
It started actually when we were students. So I was a music composition major, and Kurt was electrical engineering major. And what I found was I was working at the University of Illinois in the experimental music studios, and I really loved analog synthesis and voltage control, this whole idea of having like secret signals that you don't ever directly hear because they are just the modulators on these other signals. So I loved, and we had a Buchla in that studio. And so I loved that, the immediacy of that. And also at that time, we literally would cut the tape with razor blades and tape it back together in new ways. So like working really late in the studio one night, I was just suddenly had this feeling of I have sound in my hands.
Wow.
And I can rearrange it. I'm like a filmmaker. It seemed like this is a different kind of music. It's like a radical break from the previous kind of music, where you have notes and people playing the notes.
You're talking about musique concrète and experimental electronic music of that era?
Being able, well, specifically, I guess, about the tape at that time.
I
It was
see.
just like that you could rearrange time.
Yeah.
And I also, I'm very, very interested in data sonification. So part of what I was interested in also was to take scientific data and turn that into sound.
Could you describe what data sonification is for the people who are watching this video briefly?
It's sort of like data visualization. It's when scientists run an experiment to try to understand something and they have a ton of data. If you can take that stream of numbers from the experiment and either treat it directly as a sound file or use it like a control signal on some sound, you immediately hear patterns that you would never see if you looked at the numbers, or even if you look at a graph, because you hear things that evolve in time really pop out when they're turned into sound. So I wanted to get into using computers, computer-generated music, but at that time, the computer music languages were very note-oriented,
Like C sound?
like C sound.
Yeah.
So you would make a score, or quote score, quote instruments, and write notes. And I felt like that was almost like a step backward, because, and it also at that time wasn't very lively or interactive, because at that time you had to use a shared campus mainframe to do the computation. So you submit a job, and then maybe once a week they would let you use the shared digital analog converter. So there was a really not interactive feeling to it at all. So I really felt like I needed that. I needed to somehow bring the computer and the liveliness of the directness of having your hands on the sound, and this cool idea of modulating, like having something, another signal, or even another signal coming from scientific experiment be the modulator. I love this voltage control modulation idea. But I wanted to put all those things together, and it didn't exist at that moment. So it started, that was a long story, but it started because I needed it for myself. And then only later did I think about maybe other people would use it too.
As it turns out, you were right about that. So you guys had to build the computer from scratch. How do you even do something like that, particularly back then when technology was certainly not what it is now, either in terms of cost or in terms of, the ubiquity of the stuff? How did you guys do it?
The first one that we used was called a platypus, and that was actually discrete multipliers. So this is before the 56,000.
Before the DSPs.
Before DSPs had been invented. So that means the platypus was a DSP, but it was this big wire-wrapped board instead of the single chip. But I should let you describe that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we had taken a synthesizer, and Lippold Haken and I worked on it together, and he had made a synthesizer that had a specific function. It did wavetable synthesis and FM and a couple of other different synthesis methods, but it was hard-coded. And we talked about how we could make it programmable so that we could actually write a program for this and have it do any algorithm. And it turned out to be very much like what a modern DSP is, but it was made with discrete memory chips and discrete adders and multipliers. So it was this giant board, and then another giant board that was for D to A and A to D conversion. And we made a way to write programs for it. It was in what's called a microcode. It's like assembly language, but it's even lower level than assembly. And Carla came, we were doing this independently, and then we met Carla, and I had suggested to Carla that she could do some things with this, because we made it, but we didn't really know what to do with it. Carla had something she wanted to do with it, and so we got together, and she wrote the very first versions of Keema when she was a graduate student to work on the platypus. And so it actually generated this microcode program that was then loaded into the platypus and did the signal processing in real time.
So Carla, you had started out as a composition major. Did you learn computer programming along the way because you needed it to be able to do Keema, or did you had you already started studying that kind of thing?
I mean, I had learned a few things on my own, and then once I met Kurt and Lippold from the Searle Sound Group, I was already teaching because I had filled in from one of my professors who went on sabbatical. And then I decided, after I met them and saw what they were doing, I decided to go back to school. So I went and got a degree in computer science.
Oh, wonderful.
And so Keema was my master's degree project.
Quite a master's degree project. So at that point, you guys were still in academia, and you were doing this. You were doing this in a college situation. What happened then?
There was sort of this political coup where the head of our lab was pushed out of the university, and so everybody at that lab had 1 year to find another job. And we were lucky enough that we could. We decided to start a company during that year that we had, transition year.
And the university was okay with you guys taking the intellectual property that you had developed while being there?
Yes, for two reasons. One was that we had funded all of it ourselves, as far as we bought all the components ourselves.
Wow.
And number two, because they had no idea what it was, and they didn't care.
It was just going to go into the dustbin of history if you guys weren't there to support it. So you left and you founded Symbolic Sound at that point?
Yes.
Wow. And so tell us the story. So when was that, and what has happened? What has happened with the system since then?
Oh, wow.
I know. Big question. Big question. Maybe, on a maybe the condensed version of what's happened since then.
So I guess the official actual incorporation date was 1990. There was another step that I left out, which was that Kurt, we had the platypus, that wire wrap board, and we knew that was not practical to be building and selling. So Kurt, after he had his dissertation defense in the morning in June 6th or something, he defended his dissertation. And then he came home and set out a big piece of paper on a drawing board and started sketching out the capybara.
Wow.
And we built the capybara, I think it took, it's June. From June until January, we got the first sounds out of it on New Year's Eve, right around midnight. So.
Wow. That's quite a story. Kurt? What was your dissertation? Just out of curiosity.
It's interesting, actually.
It was a system for designing and optimizing digital filters. So you could make a specification for a digital filter, and it would search the space of implementations of the filter for the one that used the least computation and had the best noise performance. And then it would automatically write a program that would implement that. And so it was both like a signal processing optimization and automatic code generation, like automatic programming, essentially.
In 1990.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. I assume that they gave you your PhD.
Yeah.
So you guys developed the capybara, and where were you as far as the Keema software at that point? Did you know that you wanted it to be, built from these prototypes that you would be wiring together with virtual lines and that kind of thing?
That was already there.
Well, you went through a couple of iterations, but by that time, you had
Yeah.
the boxes and boxes way of doing it.
Yeah, the first way was, the hierarchy was that a sound would be inside another sound, like the dolls that you open up and there's another doll inside. So that was actually the first way it was. But then it was really confusing, like you'd be opened out, your signal flow would have all these windows open and then you couldn't remember where
you were.
So yeah,
Interesting.
quickly went to the signal flow, which initially I think maybe flowed upward.
Yeah.
And then eventually pretty quickly went to the left-right normal kind of way.
The normal kind of thing that makes sense, at least in Western cultures.
Yes, right.
Right. Wow. Okay, so you had the software working. You developed the software in Smalltalk.
Yes.
Right from the beginning, and then I assume that all the microcode on the capybara and on the Paca, that was microcode that you were working on that was communicating with it?
The capybara, so the Pacarano, or the platypus, was this discrete thing that Lippold and I designed. Mm-hmm. The capybara used a Motorola DSP, and so we wrote in a DSP assembler in Smalltalk, and then we wrote all the algorithms for oscillators and filters and that we would write in assembly language and have Smalltalk compile that and load it into the capybara.
And it needed more than one. In order to match what the platypus could do, we had to have four.
It was about
Motorola
two
DSPs.
Motorola DSPs to equal what the platypus did. And so I designed it to have up to 8, and so you could plug in cards that had a single DSP on it, and then the Keema would automatically adapt to how many there were and split the algorithm among all the separate DSPs.
To be able to optimize
to get as much as you can out of it.
Fortunately, now today in 2018, there's quite a bit more hardware capacity than there was back then.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of the story. So you built this system. You had it working. How did you get it out into the world? What happened once you had the software and the hardware and you were ready to start going with it?
It is kind of funny in retrospect to think that I thought people are going to go crazy as soon as they find out about this. Everybody's going to want it.
I did.
And so the first thing we did, I think, was through the Computer Music Journal. I think we sent out postcards. People know about it. And then we went on a sort of a tour of the East Coast. Starting in Montreal and then going down through Boston and Vermont. We visited a lot of places on that tour. And then I'm trying to remember when Richard Festinger had invited us to come out to San Francisco State.
Yeah.
And that's when I met you.
That's when we met. So you were going down the East Coast, I assume, touring music departments of universities. That was sort of the first place where and I assume things have continued to grow and grow since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're still here and you're still doing it. So I think it's really important to, I was going to ask you this question, but I think I'll sort of state that while Keema is something that started out in terms of the universities and it still has a strong connection to to computer music departments and so forth, that's not the only group of people that use Keema.
No. In fact, it's very being used in film and very much so in games right now, because it's so open as far as designing new sounds,
right.
And quickly prototyping and getting some wild sounds that no one has heard before.
So what would you say, I mean, if there's such a thing, what would you say is your typical Keema user? Or what are some of the typical Keema users that you guys have come across?
As you know from being at KISS, there's a wide range of people using it. I think if they have anything in common, I would say independent-minded.
One of the strengths of Keema is that like Carla said, is that it's open-ended, and it doesn't have a reliance on necessarily any forced relation with notation. You can work with music through MIDI messages, but it's not enforced. And so for people who don't have that, who don't want to be forced into that mold, this is a kind of a good system to work with. Also, people who are experimental by nature and curious and just want to say, well, okay, I got something, but I really want something a little different. There's usually a way in Keema to go in and make it different, and that's not always possible in all other software.
Oh, to say the least. I mean, I can tell you from my perspective as a sound designer, everybody and their mother has Pro Tools, and everybody within Pro Tools has all of the same plugins, right? Because that's just what it is. That's how the system works. And I think that it's very important for people that are really trying to push the envelope of creating very highly unique and aesthetic sort of things like that, to think along those lines. So I used to work at Skywalker Sound, and so I knew Ben Burt and was immediately impressed when I heard Star Wars Episode 2 at the sounds of the engines within the ships, because they were different than the previous engines that he had done in the first three and even in the Phantom Menace. And I asked him about that, and I said, "Hey Ben, I think I figured out how you did that. I was using a really slow sine wave within this sci-fi plugin within Pro Tools. Is that how you did it?" And he said, "Oh no, I used the chopper algorithm in Keema." And I said, and that was when my ears really perked up. For me, the sound that really typifies what you were just saying, Kurt, is the vocalizations in the movie WALL-E. And those were done by Ben, and they're so unique and they're so beautiful, and there is no way that I could think of in any other software that you could possibly do something like that. Can you talk a little bit about Paca and Pacarana? Because of course hardware has marched along, and we don't use capybaras anymore, as I recall.
Yeah, so we went through 4 generations of capybaras, and each one had a substantial increase in performance capabilities. And then for this latest generation, we decided to go to a smaller package by leaving out the audio interface from it. And so that, because of one of the most common complaints from people who were trying to tour with Keema was that the capybaras is 3U rack-mounted box, and it was just really difficult to travel with it. So we wanted to make something that was only 1 rack unit high and roughly the same size as maybe a thick laptop, so that it was easily portable. And so when we went from the capybara to the Pacarana, we also found some DSPs that are way more powerful, so that we were able to have effectively the same power as 40 of the old DSPs with just 4 of these new ones. And so that's in the Pacarana, and the Paca is the junior version of it with 2 processors in it. And the names are also related, because the Pacarana is a little bit smaller version sort of like the capybara. It's a smaller rodent, and the paca is yet a slightly smaller rodent. But they're all in the same family of animals.
You're a small company, so being able to focus on the things that you do really well makes perfect sense. Why should you be designing D to A systems when Mark of the Unicorn and M Audio and all of those people can do that stuff, whereas none of them can design, these wonderful DSP systems like the ones that you guys have? So I'm delighted to be able to see you guys because we are here at KISS 2018 in Santa Cruz, and so it was a quick jaunt for me to drive up from LA to be able to be here and join you this weekend. Why don't you tell us about what this is?
So it's the Kyma International Sound Symposium, and it's a gathering of people who are using Keema to give talks to each other, share information with other practitioners. It's kind of amazing when you get to sit down and have lunch with somebody who is using the same language you are. And it's nice to be able to trade tips and just talk about it.
Agreed.
And then we have concerts so that people can show their latest work that they've been doing in Keema. And we have discussions after those concerts too. So it's it's very intensive. And then, I learn a lot. I get inspired for the rest of the year coming to these things because we get so many suggestions from people and ideas just from looking at what people are doing and, they're using it that way? Okay. It's energizing for the whole year.
That's wonderful. How long has it been going on for?
This is the 10th one.
Wow. And what was the genesis of KISS? When did you guys decide, or how did you decide to give birth to this?
We had been thinking about doing it for many years, but it seemed too intimidating. It seemed like we can't put on a whole conference. And then one time, Christian Vogel, he was at that time in Barcelona, and he just said wasn't intimidated by it at all and said, yeah, let's do it, because he had a friend who had a bar and he had friends who had audio equipment and worked for Audio distributors or whatever, and he was very relaxed about it, and so I think that was the impetus. We did the first one in Barcelona.
Was it at a university?
No, it was at his friend's bar.
That's great. And then since then, have they all been at universities like this, or?
The next one was in Vienna, and that one also was in a private space that was some kind of a union hall. Yeah.
Wow.
Bruno Liberda did.
That's and so you've always had people that are Keema users that are local to a particular region of the globe help you put on the party at that point in that place.
It's been like a partnership.
Yeah.
We do it together, and so each one has its own flavor, and each one's. I keep saying everyone has been the best one because it has a different flavor each time.
Tell me what you guys think the future of Keema is.
I have a lot of ideas about that.
What would you like Keema to look like in 5 years or 10 years?
I think in general, like just very generally speaking, just to reduce the distance between thinking of a sound and realizing the sound. So I've been trying to make progress toward that with things like the gallery, where you can start with your own sample and then say, make a gallery on this, and it will give you like 100 starting points, all based on your sample. So that at least for me, it's easier to tweak something that exists than to start from the completely blank slate.
That's incredible. Yeah, I have to say that the usability and the user interface changes that you guys made in Keema 7 were so incredible for lowering sort of the anxiety level of people coming into this big, incredibly amazing, huge open space like that. And to be able to have those tutorials online and to be able to have the gallery and the sound du jour and all of those kinds of things, I think that's really been nice. So, lowering the threshold even more, making the user interface even that much more approachable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thinking of ways, some kind of more automated ways, maybe. Getting from here, I'm pointing to my ear instead of my brain, but starting from the sound, what you want the sound to be, and making it easier to get started. But then leave it so you can get down deep into the code, and if when you want to, that you can still get in there and do stuff, but maybe make the initial starting points faster and faster from the idea to the implementation.
That's great. I think it's really important before we wrap up here to mention that people don't just use Keema for art and for aesthetic things, but they use it for real scientific research and audiology and things like that as well, right?
Yeah, there's some very interesting, like speech and hearing science people using Keema. One of the recent things is Dragana Sequoia. So she's at Gallaudet, and she's doing research on many different areas. But one of the things that she's working on is when people get a cochlear implant or other kind of hearing assistance, you have to learn how to use it. It isn't just the same as the ear.
So you're rewiring your brain to be able to deal with this new input coming in.
But she's got this really good idea of giving people an opportunity to practice situations, real life situations, but turning it into more of a game. Because it would be really boring to just sit there and practice using this device. But instead, they're making it into a game, so you like to spend time practicing, learning to use this new device.
Well, especially since many of the patients are younger people.
Children.
Right.
That's a very good motivation.
Yeah, gamification of it's the drink your cod liver oil, thing with a spoonful of sugar, right?
And because of the tediousness of it,
right.
You have to practice.
Yeah. So I have one more question to ask you, which is, what does it feel like being here, the last 2 days, and seeing all of this incredibly interesting musical work happen? All of these people coming up and speaking about the work that they do in academia, using the Keema system, all of these different ways that people are using this instrument that you guys created that you never would have, imagined when you did it. What does it feel like to have given birth to something that has spread like this, and have to be able to come and see how other people use what it is that your life's work has been?
Actually, it's kind of humbling, to be honest, because you have this kind of surreal feeling of it, that it's taken off on its own as its own thing, and the people are attracted around it to each other, and there's these things going on between the people who are using it. It is completely separate from us. And it always amazes us when we go to KISS. We're always surprised to hear some of the things people are doing, in a good way, surprised. And humbling, I think, is the best description of it.
Yes, because people don't, of course, because people are busy, and if they're having success, they don't necessarily tell us about what they're doing, and here's how we see their success. If they have problems, of course, they talk to us.
The only time you know about it is everything is broken and this isn't working.
It's actually a really nice feeling to be here because you get, it's like a really big boost, because everything, there's so much positivity associated with, hey, look at what I did, and it really is something.
It's so sweet. And, yes, I can certainly tell you that everybody completely adores you. I do, for sure. And it's just the customer service you have, and the communication and the rapport and the community that you have built around this is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. I really want to thank you for creating this and having it be, a wonderful part of my life, as well as the part of so many other people. So thank you both, Kurt Hebel and Carla Scaletti. Where can people find out more about Keema if they're interested in listening to it and seeing what it does?
Symbolicsound.com.
Symbolicsound.com. Sounds great, and I will put up as many videos as I can showing people what this great system is. And I want to thank you guys. It's been a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to one more day of fun with you tomorrow.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming too.
Of course.
So that's it for this episode of Under the Big Tree. My thanks to Carla Scaletti and Kurt Hebel for taking the time to let us talk with them. If you have any comments to make, please feel free to add them in the comments section below. And as always, if you like what we're doing here on Under the Big Tree, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. For now, this is Nick from the Kyma International Sound Symposium, signing off.